If you're a mom who's been told you're toxic or that your adult child doesn't feel safe around you, there's a very specific kind of pain that comes with those words. It doesn't just hurt, it disorients you because you're sitting there thinking, I loved you. I showed up. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. And now you're the villain in a story that you don't even recognize. I know part of you has replayed every mistake, every argument, every moment you wish you could take back. And I know you've wondered, maybe late at night, was I really that bad? I know because I've done the same things. And here's the thing. Most moms in your position spiral in two directions at once. One part of you is defensive. That's not fair. That's not who I am. And another part of you is terrified that maybe your child is right or partly right. That back and forth, it's exhausting. It's disorienting and it's lonely. But here's what I've seen over and over in my work with moms. The language of estrangement has shifted over the last 5 to 10 years. It's like boundary, safety, toxic, and trauma have moved out of the therapy office and into everyday conversation. And in some ways, that actually is a good thing. But here's what else has happened. Those same words are now being used, sometimes accurately, and sometimes not so accurately, to land an entire relationship as irredeemable. And a mom who made mistakes, like I did, maybe like you did, who was imperfect, who maybe was more critical than she realized, she gets flattened into one word, toxic. That's not a diagnosis. That's a dismissal. Now, I'm not saying your adult child is wrong to use those words, and I'm not saying that their feelings aren't real. But what I want you to see is something else entirely. When the conversation stops at "you're unsafe," and there's no way back, there's no path, there's no room for repair, there's no curiosity, no, can we talk about it? That's not just a boundary. That is a door that's locked from the other side. And what I've noticed is that moms often respond to that locked door in exactly the wrong way. We defend ourselves. We explain. We apologize again. We send the long message. And none of it works. Because we're responding to the label instead of understanding what's actually happening beneath it. There's something really important about the generation gap here that most people miss. When we hear, I don't feel safe, our generation tends to hear, you're dangerous, you're abusive, you're a threat. But that's not always what our adult child means. Sometimes what they mean is, when I'm around you, I feel like I'm 14 years old again. I feel small. I feel like I can't be the adult version of myself. And that's very different. That's not about whether they were fed, loved, clothed, or you showed up at their games. That's about a dynamic, a pattern between the two of you, the way we interact with each other. We tend to get into habits, and not always healthy habits, but most often we don't even realize that we're in a cycle. Sometimes not feeling safe is therapy speak for an adult child beginning to see a pattern or a cycle that's just not useful. But here's what I want you to know. Being labeled the bad guy doesn't make you the bad guy. And more importantly, staying stuck in that label, defending yourself against it, trying to prove that you're not toxic, That's not the work. That's not going to help reconnection to happen. Focusing on the label will prevent you from focusing on what really makes a difference. The work is something else entirely. What I'm inviting you to is change that happens for you, not change that happened to you. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Imagine you're in a grocery store. You're in the produce section and you look up and there's your adult child. Yes, this actually happened to one of my moms. Your heart stops. Your stomach drops. 1,000 thoughts hit you at once. Do I say something? Do I pretend I don't see them? Should I just turn around? And in that split second, your entire nervous system is deciding, is this threat or is it safety? And here's what happens for most moms in that moment. If you haven't done the inner work, you react. You either avoid them completely or you approach and hope for the best, carrying all your anxiety into the conversation that you're not prepared for and your adult child is not prepared for. But if you have done the work, something shifts. Not because you've been cleared of the label, not because your adult child finally sees you differently, but because you have taken the time to get to know yourself. You understand, maybe for the first time, why you made the choices that you made. Not to excuse them, not to avoid responsibility, quite the opposite. That kindness towards yourself is what gives you the courage to look more deeply at your part in the dynamic, in the patterns of your relationship. And here's what happens when that kind of courage kicks in. You don't feel like you have to explain yourself. Your need to defend against the label, it releases. You're not standing in the produce section hoping to be proven right. You're just standing there, grounded, maybe feeling a little anxious, but able to decide how you want to act in that moment. Not out of fear, panic, or dread, but deciding for a settled inner confidence. Recognizing that your adult child is also dealing with 1,000 thoughts firing inside them. And you being able to let their thoughts belong to them without taking responsibility for them. That's the shift. Because when we're reactive, we're defending. And when we're responsive, we can connect. From that grounded place, you can approach your adult child, if you want to, with openness and without expectation. Not because you need them to do something, but because you've already given yourself what you needed. Being honest about our part in the dynamic without beating ourselves up about it helps us remember that lacking skill is different from being difficult. And most of us weren't taught how to repair a rupture. We were taught to move on, to not talk about it, to let it go. So when our adult children come back with a vocabulary we don't recognize, I need to protect my peace, or this relationship doesn't feel safe, of course we feel blindsided. Not because we don't care, because no one ever gave us the tools for that type of connection. And that's not a moral failure, that's just a gap. And gaps can be filled. This week, notice if you find yourself defending against the label. Notice when you feel the urge to explain, to prove that you're not the bad guy, to send the message that lays out your case. And instead, I invite you to pause. Ask yourself, what's the dynamic underneath this? What would I need to understand about myself? Not to excuse what happened, but to grow from it. Because here's what shifts things. It's not the perfect apology, and it's not the convincing argument. A mom who's done her own work, who can hold her head up in the produce section, not because her child has cleared her, but because she knows who she is. That mom is ready for whatever comes next. If this resonates with you, I want you to know this is the work we do here. On this channel, I help moms heal from the heartbreak of estrangement, not by waiting for their adult child to change, but by doing the inner work that changes everything. Subscribe and join this community.